Question number 2, the Leader of the Opposition, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister. Does he have confidence in his Minister of Education?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Order. I've got to call the member. Now, I must say, with all the noise, I didn't even hear what the Prime Minister said. I trust the answer was yes, so we'll go to the Leader of the Opposition, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he agree with his Education Minister that it is good news that the schools are only losing up to 2 teachers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think that needs to be seen in the context of what the Minister said. Well, I can take any couple of words out of context if I want to. Well, what the Minister was saying is that there is an absolute limit to the number of teachers that a school could lose. What she was also saying, though, very importantly, is that there will be 962 schools that will potentially gain a teacher. There are 230 schools that will potentially gain 2 teachers. And there is well over $100 million going into professional development to help the 50,000 teachers that are there. And I think if we go and ask New Zealand parents, do they want to see professional development supporting quality teaching in this country, I think you'll find the answer from most of them will be yes.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Is the Prime...
Order. Now, the House will come to order. I must be able to hear these questions. I know my hearing isn't great, but the noise is pretty loud, and I must be able to hear these questions. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When he said yesterday that he was aware of the impact of the changes made to staffing ratios when budget decisions were made, why did he only personally intervene in this issue on Monday this week to limit staff losses to 2?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, as we made clear yesterday, there's always been a transition process that was going to take place. And it made sense, as we wrote to the schools last Thursday, it made sense actually for that transition to be in conjunction with them. But because we wanted to allay the fears that some parents could have, we've made it clear that it's limited to 2 FTEs. But this may be the piece of information that Labor doesn't want out there, and that is that the performance of New Zealand students on average did not change between 2000 and 2009 when it came to reading, the vast bulk of time when Labor were in government. If one looks at the PISA study and other international studies...
Order. I think we've had sufficient answer to the question asked. The Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, is he saying that by increasing class sizes that he will be able to improve the educational learning of our children?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, what I am saying, Mr Speaker, is that between 2000 and 2009, the reading performance of New Zealand students on average did not change. What I'm saying is that the performance in PISA and other international surveys of student achievement have remained relatively stagnant over the past decade, despite the fact that we've hired 6,000 extra teachers. We now have approximately 50,000 teachers, and maybe it's time to give those teachers a bit more support to get quality teaching outcomes.
Point of order. Point of order, the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, that was actually a pretty straight question. Did he consider increasing class sizes improve child learning quality?
Order. The member has just pointed out, he asked, does he consider that? And the Prime Minister, in answering, gave information about the impact of number of teachers employed on pupil achievement, and I think that's a reasonable answer to the question asked, because the question asked is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and the Prime Minister pointed out the facts of the matter about the number of extra teachers, therefore the reduction in class sizes seem to have no impact on learning outcomes. And that seems to be a reasonable way to answer the question. The Leader of the Opposition. Order. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition's question.
Can he and his Education Minister give parents an assurance that school staffing entitlements will not be further reduced after the end of the 3rd year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, we'll work our way through that in the course of time. But what is interesting is there'll be an election and quite a number of budgets before then.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree with intermediate school principal Barry Roberts, who said in response to the changes announced yesterday, quote, "Instead of death by shooting, it's death by strangulation, and hope we're not going to notice the difference"?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no. And let me go back to this basic point. Because let's ask the most basic question for a moment. Are we all sitting around in this country saying that when there is no change in the average reading performance of our kids for over a decade, when we're saying that PISA studies and others are showing there's no basic change, and yet we've hired 6,000 extra teachers and had very low roll growth, we should just carry on and hire a few hundred more? Because if it hasn't worked for the last 6,000, it's probably not going to work for the next 6,000. The facts of life are, Mr. Speaker, those guys left office with 1 in 5 kids being unable to read and write properly, and they didn't care. Well, we're actually doing something about it.
Leader of the... Sorry, is this a point of order? The Right Honourable Winston Peters, point of order.
Speaker, you will observe that the Prime Minister received a question, then he rephrased another question, proceeded to answer that question, and then ended up with a rant and rave about the Labor Party. Now, surely that can't be the way we conduct question time.
Order. Again, order. I'm on my feet. Again, I invite the Right Honourable Member to listen to the question. The question asked whether the Prime Minister agreed with a statement from a school principal, I think it was, that the changes were not being something to do with being shot, but death by strangulation or something from memory. Now, asked whether the Prime Minister agreed with that. The Prime Minister, in his answer, told the House what he did agree with. And if members want to ask questions of ministers what they agree with, whether they agree with certain fairly out there statements, I mean, it was a fairly out there statement, the ministers are at liberty to tell the House what they do agree with. And I'm not going to stop ministers from telling the House what they do agree with over important issues like this. This is not just a game. These are important issues, and that's why members are focused on these issues. And the chance to get decent questions and answers in the House is an important part of our process. And I think that was not an unreasonable answer to the question asked. The Right Honourable Winston Peters, point of order.
My hearing is as good as yours, for a start. I heard what the answer was with respect to the teacher's comment, but he then he raised a new question himself and then proceeded to answer that. And you didn't stop him. And then he attacked the Labour Party. You didn't stop him doing that. He answered the question, the first one first, then phrased a question of his own, then he answered that, and that, sir, is not within standing orders.
With respect to the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Speaker is the determinant of that. And again, I can be of far greater assistance to members if questions don't ask whether ministers agree with all sorts of statements from all over the place, because it's very hard to pin ministers down when they're asked their opinions, because ministers are at liberty to give their opinions if they're asked their opinions. I can be of much greater assistance if a question asks for information, and the information can be very telling in itself. And that's where I can be much greater assistance to members. The Honourable Trevor Mallard, point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave to table a PISA report which shows that 15-year-olds reading in New Zealand went from 4th in the world in 2006 to 2nd in 2009.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question. Leader of the Opposition, supplementary. Oh, point of order, is it?
No,
supplementary question. Leader of the Opposition.
Does he stand by his statement to Radio New Zealand yesterday that as of Tuesday morning he hadn't had anyone specifically raise the issue of class sizes to him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table a number of letters addressed to John Key and copied to me, expressing a great deal of concern about the raise in class sizes.
Leave is sought to table those documents. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 3, Shane Arden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.